Yes, this talk was written under the influence of Mike Birbiglia, if you know who that is.
Yes.
A comedian who I got to, after I do this, I go home and review his show. But it was very interesting to balance these two things. So what do you call someone who's defined by the fact that they are undefined about something as undefinable as spirituality? This group is looking for a term. Polls call them none of the above, or nuns for short, although that doesn't work because of the N-U-N-S thing, you know. They're also all of the above, because they often derive spiritual wisdom from a variety of sources, ancient and modern. They're often called unchurched or unaffiliated because they won't join anything, but many were in a church at one time, and many of them often attend churches still. There's the clumsy spiritual but not religious, but who's to say that religious people aren't spiritual? Full of you-yous here that are religious and spiritual at the same time. I call them mystical, agnostic animists, Ma. I don't think Ma is ever going to go over very well, so I'm just going to call them animists. And I would like that term to come into common use, because I really think that is the key to this group. Because the key feature of their belief structure is that all of life is animated in varying degrees. That the world, from the tangible to the unseen, from this planet extending all the way out into the cosmos, the universe, and beyond, is composed of energy that vibrates and spins, exists in fields. So the world is not a theatrical set that we live in, and then we go die and go somewhere else to this group. Life, the universe, and everything is composed of configurations of energy and various degrees of solidity, from empty gas to solid lead. And we are immersed and enmeshed in all of this energy. And occasionally we embody out of this energy to experience life subjectively, such as life here on Earth. This energy is something that we can interact with. You know, there's psychics out there that feel that they know it really well. But I think that because of the limitations of the mind and the senses, that we're pretty much kind of flying blind when we're trying to interact and manipulate and work with this energy. But the bottom line is that it's not a purely empirical world. That there's much room for mystery, and there's really no room for arrogance. Science is really driving a lot of this definition. I could go on and on and on about physics. But let's just look at astronomy alone and the power of image. So Galileo showed us that the Earth revolved around the sun. Big shift, big shift. The Apollo spaceflight showed us ourselves. First time we were ever able to see the entire Earth. Big shift. And then the shift of our age right now, the Hubble Deep Field Photograph, with its thousands of galaxies showing the vastness, the true vastness of the universe. A micromanaging personal God that helps you win football games does not jive with this. It just doesn't, you know? And as I mentioned before, there's some interaction with this. It's not necessarily impersonal, and this is the part that I'm learning to articulate. That I hope to articulate someday in a book. But whatever our belief systems that we embrace in the future, it has to be universal. It has to be something that works as well here as it does in the Andromeda Galaxy. Universalizing is the key word of the future. And at the core of this movement and how different it is from a lot of the population out there, are differences in the very fundamental concepts of time and space. And you just don't get a more basic building block of reality than time and space. Science has made space a lot bigger than before, mind-blowing big. Don't have enough brain to conceive of it big. At the same time, things like objects, and even the Earth itself, which used to seem so solid, physics shows us that they're not. Every object is mostly space, because atoms are mostly space. There's barely any there. It's all free illusion. If we were the nucleus here, our understanding of time is where things are really going to shift, because this group doesn't look at biblical time or even Vedic time or even geologic time. It's bigger than that. And when your sense of time is small, as it is to most of those who are deeply ingrained in Judaism and Christianity and Islam, which is a lot of people, when your sense of time is small, you can justify a lot of things. The shorter you think time is, the more you can justify all kinds of stuff. And the difference is, because the shorter the time is, the more important it seems to be. And the differences between the unaffiliated and most religious folks are along the lines of how we frame basic fundamental concepts of existence. Is your world, your life, a smoothly ascending line that goes up like this and ends? Because we all have kind of a graphic idea in our heads very deeply of how life is. A lot of life, people see it just like that. Smooth, ascending, always hit it that way. This group sees their world and their life as more like a circle, a spiral, some kind of repeating pattern. That seems strange, it seems arbitrary, but it's really a core difference. We're in a period right now of what I call a great dissolving. Religions as well as ontological frameworks are deconstructing. And the thing that set all of this off was the personal computer and the internet 30 years ago. You can trace the rise of the spiritual not-religious and the rise of the personal computer follow the exact same path. That happened because libraries and churches and libraries were no longer the sole repositories of spiritual and philosophical knowledge. A free and anonymous flow of information was possible. People who were curious could go and explore and not let themselves out of the closet, spiritual closet. And because of this, much of mainstream religion is losing its hegemony. But it's not just Christianity. It's other religions too. This is rocking the world of Asia. But at this moment in time, faiths yet to be have not yet formed. And some people insist that they never should, especially those with dogmas and doctrines. It's a frankly chaotic period right now in spirituality, but one of great potential. I liken it to the ocean and the darkness and how we all came from the ocean, or the fertile wetness of the dark soil. Or really, it's more like the dream state, that restores us. And I really think that Unitarianism is the bridge that's going to take us from the religions that have been part of our world for so long to the religions that are going to be part of us for thousands of years to come. Up until 2,000 or so years ago, religions were indigenous and earthy, or they were dressed up indigenous, like Taoism and Shinto. And at that time, thousands of years ago, Vedic thought had turned into the archetypal mythology of Hinduism, and in the Middle East, Sumerian thought had warped into the Egyptian religions. And in Europe, paganism had peaked with the finely articulated gods and goddesses of Greek, Celtic, Nordic, and other cultures. And then, the transcendent personalities such as Buddha, Christ, and Muhammad came on the scene in what was called the axial age, and the divine got a human face to emulate. And that emphasis on transcendent personalities isn't going to happen again. We're too networked, we're too skeptical of consolidated power, too aware of human fallibility. In this new axial age that is coming upon us, as Thich Nhat Hanh said, the next Buddha will be community. That is incredibly profound. It's like the open source coding of WordPress and Mozilla for you geeks out there. It's like the knowledge codification of Wikipedia. If the divine is truly that which is greater than the sum of the parts, then the faith of the 21st century will be much the same. It will be that which arises. It will be that which responds to the needs and imaginations of people, and that which keeps pace with the path of human progress. And all of this, forevermore, is going to be enmeshed in technology. This is a worldwide phenomenon. Let me stat you up a bit about that. Nationally, animists are about 20% of the population. A couple of years ago, that was 18%, so it's clicking up there. Geographically, it reaches a peak of about 30% in the Northwest, where people are very independent and nature-oriented, and it's over 30% in the Northeast. And the Unitarian heritage of the Northeast has a lot to do with that. It's also more urban. The lows are in the deep South, where it's about 10%, like in Alabama and Mississippi, and in Dallas and Fort Worth, North Texas, it's about 15%, and maybe up to 18% by now. Europe and Canada have been at it longer. It's strongest in Scandinavia and the United Kingdom. Interestingly enough, you wouldn't think that. The United Kingdom, very much so. Estimates are that people who identify themselves as unaffiliated, 40% to 80% or more, particularly 80% in Scandinavia. Eastern Europe, Italy, Spain, Switzerland, not so much. Hinduism and Buddhism in Asia, and Judaism as well, are struggling with generations that identify themselves as such on polls, but only engage in the religion culturally. They are cultural Buddhists, cultural Hindus, cultural Jews. They embrace the art, the archetype, and the festivities, all the fun stuff, but not the religious beliefs. And when those religious beliefs intersect with politics, they run as fast as they can. And to them, basically, many of the old arguments just don't seem important anymore. All of the old arguments that their religions have been carrying along. In America, it's a white phenomenon in America. African Americans still tend to identify with the religion of their parents' choice. But however, as the boomer parents die off, as African Americans get older, they tend to drop that and call themselves unaffiliated, which I think is interesting pressure there, peer pressure, family pressure there. Latinos are increasingly spiritually unaffiliated, mainly driven by leaving the Catholic Church. There is something about the Catholic Church. Once you leave it, you don't go anywhere. You just don't. You've gone. Totally done. Just go on that for a while. The hallmark about this movement is how youth-driven it is. 30% of those under 35 are animus. It increases to 35% if you're under 25. And the biggest bunch of those who are over 30 are the ones that have left the Catholic Church. Most of those who are under 30 never went to church as an adult. Presumably, as soon as their parents finished paying for college, they're done with it. So it's a phenomenon that goes across all socioeconomic ranges. People really thought that this was going to be a wealthy thing, people who had time to think. It's not. There's people who think this is blue-collar and manual labor and all kinds of stuff. All ranges of income, all ranges of education have this in them. It tends to be more men than women, and it does skew extremely urban. It is far higher among Democrats and independents. And if you want this data, it's on the Pew Forum for Religion and Public Life. All you have to do is Google nuns on the rise. It's a really fascinating polling process that this went through 30 years ago. They assumed, if you said, I hope to God, they assumed that you were an atheist, And then, over time, they have begun, and particularly in the last few years, have begun to understand how to ask the questions better. They stopped asking the questions from a Judeo-Christian perspective and started asking them more from an anthropological perspective. They redid the polls, and they started asking the questions differently. And then they stopped using the word God so much, or prayer, and they started using words like universal spirit. Do you believe in a universal spirit? And do you believe in the power of emotional support? And the result was a lot more accurate picture. So this phenomenon's been with us forever. We just started articulating it now. We're also learning through these polls that where people attend church is not necessarily what they consider their faith. This is especially true in unity churches and New Thought churches. If you poll them and you ask them, do you consider yourself a unity? They'll go, no, but I like the church. In my Moonlady community, what some call cultural creatives or cultural consciousness communities, it's over half, well over half. Now the demographic polls at Winter Solstice Celebration, most attendees refuse to decline to identify themselves as have a particular path at all. Some of them walked an interesting hybrid route. Budo-pagan was my favorite. Two people who didn't even know each other identified themselves as Budo-pagan. And also, two people who didn't know each other identified themselves as being a member of the Church of the Imaginary Friend. So this demographic, which is so broad, is anchored on one end by hard agnostics. They won't verify spiritual dimensions of life, but they're not going to negate it either. They're just not that interested in it. They start to flinch if you talk too much about God, or love, or souls, and they are very hug averse. Goes all the other way to the spirit-besotted, love is all junkies who read spiritual books, watch spiritual videos, attend spiritual events, and just can't hug enough. Flu is rampant among these people. Hardly anyone in church right now. The love is all people, they tend to get a lot of attention. The wavy, gravy, oh daddy, oh wow contingent. Plus the high-minded, gushy folks who talk of spirit with a capital S and love with a capital L. And the quiet majority of this movement is on the other end of the spectrum and in the middle. The woman who finds spirit in her garden because she's able to participate in the process of life and create life. The man who is fishing in a creek and he feels this deep connection to the earth and his food and his body. He feels they're all one process together. The Unitarian person who just won't join, damn it. You know? A teenager at a rave, a 20-something at a concert who is deeply rhythmic environment, moving in unison, saying the same lyrics. That's their spiritual experience. It's all about feeling the flow of energy, acting in harmony with its patterns and its rhythms, like an artist who is making art, a scientist who is making science, authentic people who are engaged in life, not TV, who are trying to see past the divisions of oneness without losing themselves in it. And they do that in this interesting balance by engaging fully in the tangible, earthbound now. They think about spirituality. It's a solid part of their lives, but they just don't spend a lot of time on it. And they're not very visible, and they're not very public about it. So let's look at the three tenets of this group: animist, mystic, and agnostic. Agnostic because they feel the problem isn't what you believe, it's the nature of belief itself. Mystical because they trust experience, not words. And animist because of this framing everything in terms of energy. So, God is everywhere, you're an animist. We are one, spiritual beings on a human path, animist. Follow a Taoist, Shinto, pagan, Native American, animist. Unity, Unitarian, New Thought, most of them are animist. Animist, like I mentioned before, frames things in terms of energy. A life force permeates all matter and space, and we are part of that life force. What some might call God, universal spirit, the divine, that oneness thing. A Chinese proverb really sums this up nicely. The divine sleeps in the stone, dreams in the plant, moves in the animal, and awakens in mankind. That varying degrees that I talked about before. Anima is the animating force of the universe. A Wunderbare. This is the first line of the Lord's Prayer sung in the original Aramaic. That means, oh, that which breathes through me. Not our Father who art in heaven, full of hierarchy and division. Oh, that which breathes through me. The very core of Christianity lies in an animistic thought. Once you believe that we, plants, animals, humans, everything, are all alike, it calls us to act with integrity as to what we drive and what we eat, how we develop our cities, how we treat our wildlands, and the way we treat each other. It forbids prejudice and violence towards others on any scale. This is a big lifestyle change, especially for us Westerners, and you can see why people don't want to do this. There is so much responsibility inherent in this path. Then there's mysticism, the mystery. And the modern urban mystic is not relegated to the life of the mountaintop anymore. Its mystical experience often comes in nature. If you've ever looked at the website TASTE, with T-A-S-T-E, with periods between it, the archives of scientists' transcendent experiences, mind-blowing. All of them have had experiences out in nature, but many of them talk about their spiritual experiences in the laboratory. It often comes in nature, but sometimes it comes in concerts and music. There's an NPR poll that said, "Why do you go to church?" And they didn't say preacher, they said music. They go for the music, especially in these big churches, with the big bands and everything, they go for the music. Oftentimes, though, this spiritual experience is much more intimate than that. It's that time when you are there with your friends and you're on the porch and you're sharing wine and conversation and talk with each other and everything flows and you think, this is why I'm alive, to exchange with people and to be here in this intimacy, enjoying the fruits of the earth like food and wine, or really great sex, that also. It's that oneness thing, It's all these mystics had some moment where they felt interconnected, harmonious, totally in balance. It might have been a knee-shaking, ground-quaking event that happened when they were in pilgrimage to a sacred spot. Or it might have been while they were washing dishes. I've had them both. Absolutely had them. Actually, mine came when I was vacuuming. The vibration got me in that state of mind. Mystics see language as limiting. The urge to define is something to be wary of. The Tao Te Ching talks about this extensively, about stop trying to define things and you will start to find the truth. It's also the basics of science, so we can't leave definition away. These people are inspired by sacred texts, but they're not bound to them because they're very, very aware of editors of words, and translation errors are so rife in sacred texts. And we are powerless to understand what the originals were. Mystical animism can be seen as the roots religion. It's relinking us to how developing humans thought of spirituality when we were pre-verbal, before we had language. We didn't wait to have language before we had spirituality. I can guarantee you that spirituality came first. And you might connect this idea of how the pre-verbal human being, as we were developing, cavemen or whatever, and women, how they viewed spirituality and how little kids view spirituality before they have words as well. And the spiritual, not religious, these nuns are trying to get to that. What was that feeling? What was that thought? And I think that young children do feel God. I know that I felt God in my backyard when I was 2. I knew it. I just didn't have a word for it. We knew God before we had the word God. All of us did. And then there's the agnostic thing, which you just have to recognize. Ultimately, we are all members of the church of the I don't know. We'll never really know. Not here. We'll never know. It is, as Poles call it, a comfort with ambiguity. I'm not all that comfortable with it personally, but I'll deal with it, And it is not for everybody. Comfort with ambiguity is not for everybody, especially if you're still bound in a polarity frame of mind where there's good, bad, right and wrong, and light and dark is bad, and light is good, The struggle with agnostics, of course, is to not get muddled and lost in the gray, to sink into some kind of spiritual doubt can be darn uncomfortable. It really can. And on those long dark nights when you can't go to sleep, being spiritually independent, it can be lonely and rough work. And there's times when I have turned to that wonderful Unitarian phrase or whatever about cherish your doubts. I'll pull that out and read it again sometimes late at night. But the agnostic, although we tend to think of them as non-committal atheists, they're not. They're a lot greater than that. Because agnostic pretty much says that the heart of all of that is a mystery. All of it, existence, is just a mystery. But trying to figure it out is a whole heck of a lot of fun. All that we know is that we won't know everything. And only in letting go of knowledge will we find truth. And the bottom line of all of this stuff is death. And And while animists have a lot of diversity in how they view a soul, they tend not to see the soul as a narrative thing. And really this is kind of core of it, the idea that we are losing the narrative framework and we're going to something else. Stories are great, we're moving beyond. And they see the soul as not being a personality that continues on past death, more or less in toto, but without the body baggage. To them, their soul or spirit or whatever is part of the anima, the animating force that animates them when they're here on earth, connects them to everything else, and to which they return when they no longer breathe. It isn't a fancy theology. It's not got a lot of details. It's sort of like Buddhism without the doctrine and for the work. And opinions range over just how much control do we have over this process. Perhaps we begin the cycle again. Perhaps we return and just be. Maybe we're in control of the process. Maybe not. Who knows? That agnostic thing again. Now, a few other qualities to sum it up are common. There's an emphasis on direct access to spirituality, such as spiritual experiences. There's a definition of what makes a spiritual moment. It's quite broad. And the spirituality is not limited to church. It's not limited to the seventh day. It's something that's woven in our lives, and I know that's a big part of Unitarianism as well. Underlying it all, and really the hallmark of it all, is a deep mistrust of organizations. Skepticism about restriction and control. These folks are very fearful of anyone who has power, who wants power, even if it's not for nefarious means. There's a lot of healing